Ride with me to Canyon Bluff, where smoke from the train still hangs in the air, and the groom's laughter cuts sharper than any knife. On that dusty platform, a woman who sold everything for love steps down, only to be mocked before the whole town. But in the shadows, a giant cowboy watches, silent, steady, waiting. This is not just a story of cruelty. It's the moment a vow is born in silence. Stay with me, because what follows will change how you see honor forever. The train screamed into Canyon Bluff, brakes shrieking like a hawk on the hunt. Steam hissed, rolling thick across the wooden platform, mixing with dust that clung to everything in this Montana outpost. Canyon Bluff had no grandeur, just a strip of leaning false fronts, a saloon where whiskey sold for 10 cents a shot, a mercantile with flour at $4 a barrel, a blacksmith hammering iron for horseshoes at a dime each. Posters curled on the depot wall, faces of rustlers penciled in faded ink. Horses tied along the rail stamped impatient hooves, jangling spurs with every twitch. The air reeked of coal smoke, sweat, tobacco juice spat dark into the dirt. Mary Ellen clutched the rail as she descended. 3 days aboard the Northern Pacific had left her swollen-ankled, wrinkled dress clinging damp with travel. Still, she straightened. She had brushed her hair at dawn, pinned her shawl, pressed the creases of her brown calico as best she could. In her pocket lay Harold's last letter, folded and worn, promising a red roof house on the ridge, a life warm and steady. This was to be her new beginning. She scanned the crowd. There, Harold. Red kerchief bright against his vest. Taller, sharper than the photograph she carried in her reticule. Sun glinted on his polished boots. He looked every inch the man who had written of sunsets, poetry, dreams larger than the Montana sky. Her heart surged. This was the moment. She stepped forward, breath shallow, hands trembling. Harold's gaze met hers. For a heartbeat, his face was unreadable. Then, the corner of his mouth lifted, twisted. A smirk cracked open into laughter. He doubled over, loud, cruel. Friends at his side erupted too, slapping thighs, boots stomping planks. "She came!" Harold shouted, voice carrying above the steam. "By God, she actually came!" The platform hushed, then filled with jeers. Mary Ellen froze. Carpetbags slipped, hit the wood with a dull thud. Harold straightened, tugging his kerchief, savoring the crowd. $20, gentlemen. That's the wager. I told you I could coax some lonely spinster from Missouri with a handful of pretty words. Letters sweet as molasses. And here she stands, laughter howled again, sharper than the train whistle. Cowboys leaned from posts. Merchants chuckled over their crates. Women turned away whispering. Children gawked. Heat burned Mary Ellen's cheeks. Her throat locked. She tried to speak. Nothing. Her dream cracked underfoot like dry kindling. "She sold everything for this trip," one man jeered. Another spat into the dust. Poor fool. Inside her chest, breath turned ragged. She saw the letter in her pocket. She saw her mother's rocking chair she had pawned. Her grandmother's silver brush sold for coins. All gone for this. Her knees trembled. Close, short. "Quick!" he laughed. They roared. She broke. Silence spread inside her skull, though the platform thundered outside. All she heard was her pulse hammering, and then movement at the edge of vision. From shadow near the freight office, a figure shifted. He had been there all along, watching. Jesse Boone, a man built like oak, towering above the crowd, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, arms corded with years of work. Dust clung to his jeans. Spurs glinted faint at his boots. He chewed once on a splinter of straw, then let it fall. One hand brushed his vest pocket. Inside, folded neat, a handkerchief frayed with years, initials long faded. A relic of his own past, kept close. He did not laugh. He did not smirk. His dark eyes brown as strong coffee, unblinking fixed on the trembling woman whose world had just shattered. The crowd barely noticed when Jesse's boots struck the planks. Heavy, steady, Thud, thud, thud. The laughter faltered. Harold's grin flickered. His companions shifted uneasily. Mary Ellen stood frozen, staring at nothing, shame weighing her shoulders. But the air around her changed, dust thickened, voices thinned. A shadow stretched beside her carpetbag. The giant cowboy had stepped from the shade, and Canyon Bluff held its breath. The hiss of steam faded, leaving only the rasp of wind dragging grit along the platform. People shifted, whispering. Some chuckled nervously. Others pretended to fuss with parcels, yet eyes never left the woman stranded in plain sight. Mary Ellen bent to lift her carpetbag. Fingers shook so badly she dropped it once, then clutched harder until the leather handle cut her palm. When she straightened, her chest heaved like a bellows, but breath did not ease. Harold laughed again, though thinner now. He spread his arms to the crowd. $20, gentlemen. Paid fair and square. I told you, any fool woman will travel for honeyed words. He patted his vest where coins clinked. And here stands the proof. The men beside him jeered. A boy whistled sharp. Someone muttered, "Poor cow." Laughter prickled her skin. Heat flushed Mary Ellen's face. Her throat locked tight. She tried to speak, no sound. She felt the stares on her shoulders, her waist, the way the dress clung after 3 days of dust and sweat. Every seam screamed her shame. Her mind dragged backward, to the rocking chair she had sold for train fare, to her father's watch pawned in Kansas City, to the small Missouri house with its sagging porch empty now, abandoned for this promise. Harold's letter had painted a red roof house on a hill. She had believed. She had gambled everything. Her breath broke. The carpetbag slid again, landing with a hollow thump. Papers fluttered from her pocket. Harold's letter creased, stained, worn from being read until edges frayed. She snatched it up, clutching tight. Words blurred. "My dearest, my heart waits in Montana." Lies. Her chest caved. For a moment the depot sound dimmed. She heard only her pulse, loud as war drums. Silence wrapped her. Then another presence. Heavy boots struck planks in measured rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. The crowd's mirth wavered. Heads turned. Jesse Boone stepped from shadow. Towering, dust streaked his sleeves. His beige hat shadowed his eyes. One hand brushed his vest pocket where an old handkerchief rested, initials nearly gone. He said nothing, just walked, steady, filling the space until Harold's grin faltered. Jesse stopped beside Mary Ellen. He stooped, lifted the carpetbag with one arm, and held it out. His hand was broad, scarred, yet careful. She hesitated, then took it, skin prickling as their fingers touched. No pity in his gaze, no mockery, just something unreadable, steady as stone. The crowd thinned, uneasy. Steam drifted away, train wheels grinding east. Harold muttered a curse and turned for the saloon, dragging his friends. "Come on, boys." The joke's done. Their spurs clattered, their laughter hollow. Mary Ellen sagged onto a bench against the depot wall. She pressed Harold's letter flat, then crushed it in her fist until paper tore. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. Jesse lowered himself onto the bench beside her. He drew the handkerchief from his pocket, frayed cloth soft with age, and held it out. His voice was rough, barely above wind. "Here." Her hand trembled as she took it. Pine soap clung faintly to the threads. She pressed it to her eyes. This time she did not stop the tears. Dust gusted along Main Street. Wagons rattled by. Merchants carried crates, glancing quick before looking away. Canyon Bluff moved on, but for Mary Ellen the world narrowed to the sting of tears and the ruin of her hope. Jesse finally spoke again. "You got someplace to go?" She shook her head. "My ranch is north," he said. "There's a bunkhouse empty. You'll be safe." Her heart lurched. She whispered hoarsely, I can't, storm's coming." His eyes fixed on the sky, reading clouds heavy over the mountains. Best not be caught without shelter. She searched his face for cruelty, for hidden jest. Found only silence, weathered calm. At last she whispered, "One night." Until I decide, Jesse tipped his hat once, as if sealing the bargain. He rose, strode to the baggage cart, hefted her trunk as though it weighed nothing, muscles corded in his forearms, veins rising beneath dust and sun. He carried it to a wagon waiting at the hitch rail, a plain box bed patched with iron straps, a sorrel mare harnessed, ears flicking. He set the trunk down, turned, offered his hand. Mary Ellen's stomach knotted, but she placed her palm in his. His skin was calloused, warm, steady. He lifted her to the wagon seat with care, arranging her skirts as if fragile porcelain. Then he climbed beside her, flicked reins. The mare pulled, hooves striking sparks. They rolled from Canyon Bluff. The depot shrank behind, the saloon doors swinging, Harold's laughter faint in the distance. Ahead stretched open prairie, dust curling in long ribbons, mountains purple under late sun. Mary Ellen clutched the ruined letter in her fist until edges cut. Pain grounded her, but something else stirred anger beneath sorrow. The wagon rattled over ruts. Shadows stretched. The wind carried grit sharp against her cheek. She did not look back. For the first time since stepping off the train, she did not feel utterly alone. The wagon rattled northward, its wheels grinding over ruts carved by seasons of hooves and rain. The prairie opened wide, golden grass rippling beneath a rising wind. Above, clouds pressed low, heavy with the threat of storm. The sorrel mare tossed her head, harness jingling, yet Jessie Boone's hands on the reins were steady, calm as stone. Mary Ellen clutched her shawl tight. Dust gritted her teeth, but she kept her gaze fixed on the horizon. Behind them, Canyon Bluff shrank into haze, its jeers fading. Yet shame lingered, coiled tight in her chest. She could still hear Harold's laughter like a scar that would not fade. The road bent toward the narrow valley, where cottonwoods lined a creek running quick with meltwater. Jessie spoke little. When he did, his voice came low, rough as a file against iron. River rises fast come spring. Best keep the mare light on the crossing. He guided the wagon through, wheels hissing as they hit the shallows. Water splashed cold against the boards, soaking Mary Ellen's boots. She gasped, then bit her lip, unwilling to complain. On the far bank, Jessie slowed the mare. He glanced sideways once beneath the brim of his hat. "Hungry?" She nodded faintly. Her stomach twisted, empty since dawn, but shame still clung too strong for words. Jessie reached behind the seat, pulled a cloth bundle. Inside lay corn biscuits and jerky, rough but filling. He held it out. She hesitated. He said nothing, simply waited. At last she took a piece, chewed slowly, the dryness nearly choking her. Yet when she swallowed, warmth spread. They rode on. The land grew rougher, hills shouldering up, pine trees crowding slopes. Dusk pressed close. Wind whipped colder. Jessie's jaw tightened. He clicked his tongue, urging the mare faster. Then at last, the cabin appeared. It stood on a knoll above the creek, walls hewn from rough logs darkened by years of weather. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. A lean-to sagged at one side, tools stacked neat beneath its eave. The cabin was plain, silent, yet solid, crouching against the slope like it had endured 30 winters already. Jessie drew the wagon to a halt. He climbed down, boots crunching gravel, then reached to lift Mary Ellen's trunk with ease. "Inside," he said simply. She stepped onto the ground, legs stiff from the ride. Cold bit through her dress. She followed him up the narrow path, boards creaking beneath their weight. He pushed the door. Hinges groaned. The cabin interior spread dim, smelling of pine and old ash. A single room walls lined with shelves of tools, a stove crouched black in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed against the far wall. No lace curtains, no carpet, no trace of a woman's hand. Only order, silence, and dust. Mary Ellen froze on the threshold. This was no red roof house on the hill. This was a shelter built for one man, alone. Her chest tightened. She clutched her shawl, uncertain. Yet Jessie moved with ease. He set her trunk down, shrugged off his coat, and bent to strike flint against kindling. Sparks caught. Soon a thin flame licked upward. He fed it patiently, coaxing heat until the stove began to glow. Mary Ellen stood still, shivering. The quiet pressed heavy. At last Jessie turned, eyes shadowed in firelight. "You'll take the bed." She blinked. "And you?" "Bunkhouse. Easier for me." "Warmer for you." He spoke as though it were settled. No room for argument. She opened her mouth to protest but closed it again. She had no claim here, no right to refuse. Yet something in his tone, firm, not unkind, steadied her. Jessie fetched a lantern, lit it, hung it from a beam. Light spread amber, showing shelves lined with jars of beans, flour sacks stacked neat, a rifle propped by the door. Everything bore the mark of discipline. No waste, no softness. Mary Ellen brushed her hand across the quilt on the bed. It was plain, stitched from scraps of wool. Still, it was clean. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She had not touched the bed since Missouri. Jessie cleared his throat. "Storm'll break soon. Rest. I'll see to the mare." He pulled his hat low, stepped outside, door shutting, with a dull thud. Mary Ellen sat heavily on the bed. Wind howled against the logs. She pressed Harold's ruined letter from her pocket, unfolded its torn edges. Ink blurred, words meaningless. She stared until tears stung. Then she dropped it into the stove's rising fire. Paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. Her breath caught. It felt like burying the last piece of her past. When Jessie returned later, shaking snow from his shoulders, he found her curled beneath the quilt, eyes closed though sleep had not yet come. He did not disturb her. He set his lantern low, pulled a blanket from a shelf, and slipped out again into the night. The cabin groaned in the storm. Mary Ellen lay awake, listening. She thought of the silence outside, of the man who had offered her shelter without question. She did not understand him, nor trust him yet, but something within that silence spoke louder than Harold's jeers. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was simple, raw. Perhaps tomorrow would not be as cruel as today. When she woke, dawn pressed pale light through the cabin shutters. The storm had passed, leaving a muffled stillness. Snow clung in drifts against the logs, whitening the world beyond the single window. The stove glowed faintly from embers Jessie must have tended in the night. Mary Ellen rose slowly, stiff from travel, hair tangled, dress wrinkled deeper. For a moment panic flared. Where was she? Then memory rushed back. Canyon Bluff, Harold's laughter, Jessie's silence, the cabin. On the table lay a tin plate with coarse bread, a strip of dried meat, and a mug half filled with water. No note, no explanation, just sustenance. Her stomach clenched. She ate cautiously, chewing slow, each bite rough but welcome. She had not tasted bread since Kansas City, and though stale, it filled her. Outside, she heard the rhythmic thud of an axe. She peered through the window. Jessie stood bare-armed in the snow, muscles coiling with every swing, splitting logs clean in a single stroke. His breath steamed, rising like smoke into cold air. Piles of wood stacked neat beside him, order born of habit. Mary Ellen turned away quickly, ashamed to be watching. She gathered her shawl, straightened the bed, tried to impose some order on herself. But the cabin offered little distraction. Every object was purposeful. Tools oiled, shelves organized, rifle loaded, boots by the door. No frivolity, no ornament. When Jessie entered, snow clinging to his beard, he set the axe aside, brushed boots against the threshold. He glanced at the empty plate, then at her. "Good," he said simply. She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. From a shelf he drew beans, poured them into an iron pot, added water. He set it on the stove, moved with deliberate economy, every gesture practiced. The silence stretched. At last Mary Ellen spoke, voice low. "You live alone here?" Jessie nodded. "Years. Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. He stirred the pot. "War took friends. Work took the rest. Easier this way." She studied his face. Lines carved deep, eyes shadowed. She thought of her own losses, family buried, home gone, Harold's betrayal. Silence was safer, yes, but also colder. Steam rose from the pot. Jessie ladled beans into 2 bowls, set one before her. The smell was sharp, earthy. She tasted cautiously. Saltless, plain, but warm. She ate in silence until her tongue betrayed her. "I can cook better than this." The words hung. She flushed, horrified at her boldness. But Jessie only paused, spoon midway, then set it down. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then you'll cook." Her heart skipped. He had not taken offense. He had offered a place, however small. After the meal, she gathered courage to rise, took the bowls, scrubbed them clean with snow packed into a bucket. Her hands ached from cold, but the task steadied her. Jessie watched from the table, saying nothing. But when she returned the bowls to the shelf, his eyes held a flicker respect, perhaps, or relief. The day passed in quiet tasks. Jessie split wood. She swept dust from the floor. He mended a bridle. She patched a tear in her shawl with needle and thread from her trunk. Neither spoke much, yet the silence felt less crushing than before. As evening fell, Jessie returned from the barn with a pail of milk, frost in his beard. He set it on the stove to warm. Mary Ellen, without thinking, reached to stir it, added a pinch of flour to thicken. The smell turned sweet, comforting. Jessie tasted first, then blinked, surprised. "Better," he admitted. His voice carried something new, quiet warmth. For the first time, Mary Ellen smiled faintly. They ate together at the table, the lantern glow soft on rough wood, shadows leaning close. The world outside was harsh, but within the cabin, a fragile thread had been spun. When the meal ended, Jessie leaned back, studying her as though weighing words. Then he said, "Not many would face a crowd like you did, standing there, not breaking." She swallowed. "I broke." He shook his head. "No. You endured." The words struck deeper than she expected. Tears stung, but she blinked them back. Jessie rose, pulled his coat, and moved toward the door. "Bunkhouse," he said. "Rest easy." She watched him leave, door closing softly. Alone again, she touched the quilt, the bowls, the lantern glow. For the first time in months, she felt not cast aside, but seen. She lay down, heart lighter, though sorrow lingered. Sleep claimed her slowly, warmed by embers and a fragile hope. Morning came sharp. The storm had cleared, leaving sky washed blue, wind cutting with mountain chill. Jessie Boone was already outside when Mary Ellen woke, his axe ringing steady against pine. She ate bread in silence, then swept the cabin, folding her shawl with care. By midday, Jessie hitched the mare to the wagon. "Supplies," he said simply. "Red Hollow." The name struck her chest with unease. She knew what awaited eyes, whispers, the echo of Harold's laughter still clinging to the depot planks. Yet she followed, climbing into the wagon seat. Jessie sat beside her, reins loose in hands scarred from work. The road wound south, snow crunching under wheels, then leveled where prairie stretched wide again. The nearer they drew to Red Hollow, the busier the road. Ranchers riding 2 abreast, wagons heavy with hay, women leading children toward the mercantile. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer carried on the wind. When they rolled into town, heads turned. It was subtle at first, a pause in the clatter of hooves, a slowed step on the boardwalk. Then the whispers began. "That's her," a woman murmured, tugging her bonnet lower. "The Missouri bride." "The one Harold duped, she's with Boone now?" Lord help her, Mary Ellen kept her chin tucked, hands clasped tight in her lap. Each word was a stone thrown. Jessie tied the mare at the hitch rail, motioned for her to follow. They entered the mercantile, bells on the door jingling sharp. Shelves stacked with flour, coffee, and canned peaches lined the walls. Behind the counter stood Martha Hargis, her hair streaked gray, her arms strong from years lifting sacks heavier than men expected. Her eyes flicked to Jessie, then to Mary Ellen. Something softened in her face. "Well now," Martha said evenly. Didn't expect to see you two so soon after the storm. What'll it be? Flour. Salt. Lamp oil, Jessie said. Martha nodded, pulling goods from shelves. As she moved, two women near the bins of beans whispered loud enough to be heard. Imagine Boone bringing her home. The nerve. She don't belong here. Heat surged to Mary Ellen's cheeks. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. Martha straightened, turned slow, her eyes cutting sharp as a blade. You ladies need beans or just air to flap your tongues? Because if it's the latter, step outside. Silence fell. The women flushed, muttered excuses, and slipped out. Mary Ellen blinked, stunned. Martha returned to the counter, setting flour with a solid thump. Pay them no mind, darlin'. This town's quick to wag tongues, slow to see truth. Her gaze lingered, kind yet steady. I know their type. I was a mail-order bride once, years back. Folks gossiped then, too. But gossip don't plow fields or mend fences. Mary Ellen's throat tightened. She whispered, Thank you. Martha only winked. You'll be fine, long as you keep your back straight and your stew hot. Men forget most slander when they're fed. Jessie laid coin on the counter, gathered the goods. He gave Martha a nod, silent but grateful. They stepped outside. On the boardwalk, Harold lounged against a post, hat tipped low, grin sharp. He raised a flask in mock salute. Well, well. The happy couple, his voice carried. Passers-by slowed. Mary Ellen froze. The memory of laughter burned hot. But Jessie stepped between them, broad shoulders blocking Harold's smirk. He said nothing, only stared, long and hard, until Harold's grin faltered. Jessie lifted the sack of flour with one hand, as if ending the conversation, and walked on. Mary Ellen hurried beside him, heart hammering. Behind, Harold's laugh rose again, thinner now, forced. They loaded the wagon. As Jessie climbed to the seat, Mary Ellen glanced back. Martha stood at the mercantile door, arms folded, eyes on her. A small nod encouragement, solidarity. The wagon rolled out of Red Hollow. Whispers followed, but so did the echo of Martha's defense, ringing stronger than scorn. The prairie opened again, air colder as sun dipped west. Mary Ellen held her shawl close, words pressing to her lips. At last she whispered, Why do you let him speak so? Why not strike him? Jessie kept his gaze on the horizon. Because fists end fast, but silence lingers. He'll know which cut deeper. She studied him, puzzled, unsettled. Yet as the wagon rattled toward Valley Creek, she felt something shift. The world had mocked her, but not everyone joined the chorus. And Jessie, silent, immovable, had given her a shield without lifting a hand. The mountains loomed darker ahead, their peaks catching last light. Mary Ellen closed her eyes briefly, hearing again Martha's words. You'll be fine, long as you keep your back straight. Her spine stiffened. For the first time since Missouri, she believed she might. But belief is fragile, and night in Montana is long. By dusk, Jessie Boone had stabled the sorrel mare, carried supplies inside, and stacked wood by the door. Mary Ellen helped unpack, placing flour and beans neatly on shelves. They ate in silence, cornbread Jessie had baked that morning, thickened milk she had stirred into sweetness. A quiet meal, unremarkable, yet steadier than anything she had known in months. Afterward, Jessie donned his coat. Town needs word about the storm. Sheriff'll ask after fences. I'll ride. Mary Ellen froze. Now? After today? He met her gaze evenly. Best face things quick. Let them know I don't hide. She said nothing, only nodded, though unease twisted her gut. Jessie saddled a bay gelding from the barn. Lantern light caught frost in his beard as he swung into the saddle. Bolt the door, he told her. Then he rode toward Red Hollow, hooves muffled by snow. Mary Ellen barred the cabin. She sat by the stove, shawl pulled close, shadows flickering on log walls. Outside the wind moaned. Inside her thoughts churned Harold's grin, Martha's defense, Jessie's silence. For the first time, she wondered what weight Jessie carried that kept him wordless. Meanwhile in town the dust lantern blazed. Light spilled across the boardwalk, mingled with fiddle music and the sharp crack of billiard balls. Inside, smoke curled thick, whiskey sloshed, laughter rang, and Harold, flush with drink and bitterness, held court at the bar. He slammed his flask down. Boone thinks he can shame me? Thinks stealing my jest makes him righteous? His companions jeered, egging him on. Harold's face flushed, eyes bright with malice. Mark me, boys. That woman ain't his to keep. She's mine to ruin, start to finish. A hush fell as Jesse entered. His frame filled the doorway, hat low, coat heavy with snow. The fiddle faltered, bow scratching silence. Boots scuffed nervously. Harold sneered, feigning bravado. Speak of the devil. Boone, you fancy yourself a savior? Taking in that cow like she's prize stock? His words slurred but cut. Jesse walked forward, spurs clicking slow. He did not speak. He ordered whiskey with a nod, poured it down in one swallow, then set the glass aside. His silence pressed heavier than shouts. Harold tried again, louder. What's it like, Boone, sharing a roof with a woman no man wanted? You warm your bunk with her weight? Gasps rippled. A chair scraped. But Jesse only stared, eyes flat, steady as iron. The room held its breath. At last Jesse spoke, voice low, gravel ground through stone. Say her name. Harold blinked. What? Say her name, Jesse repeated. Silence stretched taut. Harold licked his lips, faltering. Around him men shifted, some uneasy, some curious. The lamp flames quivered in still air. Harold's bravado cracked. He looked away. Not worth it. Jesse's gaze did not soften. He stepped closer, towering, until Harold shrank back against the bar. Then Jesse lifted his glass, slammed it down hard enough to crack the rim. Then hold your tongue. Without another word, he turned, strode out into the night. The room exhaled. Harold's companions muttered, shaken by the weight of silence heavier than fists. Snow fell thick as Jesse rode back toward Valley Creek. At the cabin, Mary Ellen dozed by the stove, Harold's ruined letter ash in the grate. She woke when boots struck the porch. Jesse entered, shook snow from his coat, and hung it by the fire. His eyes were shadowed, unreadable. She whispered, "He was there, wasn't he?" Jesse did not answer at first. He poured water into the kettle, set it on the stove. Only when steam began to rise did he speak. "He won't cross me in public again." Mary Ellen shivered, uncertain if the words were promise or warning. They sat in silence, the storm muffling the world outside. She watched Jesse's hands, steady even as weariness lined his face. She thought of Martha's words, "Keep your back straight," and for the first time, wondered if Jesse too needed someone to steady him. The kettle whistled. He poured tea, slid a cup toward her. Their eyes met briefly, then broke apart. She sipped, heat seeping into her chest. Fear still lingered, but so did something else, a strange sense of safety, fragile yet real. Outside, the night deepened. In Red Hollow, Harold nursed his shame, plotting, his vow unspoken but heavy. And in Valley Creek cabin, Mary Ellen sat across from Jesse Boone, the silence between them no longer empty, but waiting to be filled. The stove ticked softly as the fire settled. Wind howled through the chinks, and snow rattled against the shutters. Mary Ellen traced the rim of her tin cup, eyes catching the faint tremor in Jesse's hands, though he tried to hide it. "Harold," she whispered. "He's nothing," Jesse said flat, but his gaze stayed fixed on the flames, as though searching for something lost inside them. Silence stretched. She leaned forward. "But you carry something heavier than Harold." He shifted, shoulders stiff beneath his worn shirt. Then, without a word, he tugged his sleeve up. In firelight, she saw the scar, an angry line of puckered flesh running the length of his arm, deep as if carved by bayonet or blade. Her breath caught. He spoke at last, voice low. "Cold Harbor, Virginia. Summer heat thick as tar. Men fell in waves. I dug graves with hands raw, buried boys younger than I was. This one," he touched the scar lightly, A gift from the day we lost a ridge and 200 men in an hour. His words came clipped, like bullets spat through clenched teeth. I carried my friend Caleb on my back until his blood soaked clean through my shirt. Buried him under oak roots with a knife I stole from a dead Reb. After that day, I stopped writing home. What was there left to say? Mary Ellen's chest ached. The West had stripped her bare, but war had hollowed him from within. She reached across the table slowly, deliberately. Her fingers brushed his arm, tracing the scar as if it were not a wound, but a map of survival. He flinched, then stilled. "You're not alone with it anymore," she said simply. For a long time, Jesse did not move. Then he covered her hand with his, rough, calloused, careful, as if afraid to break the fragile truth she'd offered. The moment stretched. Outside, the storm quieted, leaving only the drip of melting ice from eaves. Jessie released her hand, stood, and went to the door. "Come," he said. Confused, she wrapped her shawl tighter and followed. The night air bit sharp, the yard ghostly white beneath a swollen moon. He led her to the fence line, boots crunching in snow, until they reached the edge of the wide field that sloped down toward cottonwoods, black against the sky. "This," he said, "is where I came when the noise inside was too loud. First winter here, I thought of laying down in the snow and not rising again." His voice was flat, but his eyes glittered with unspoken weight. But I kept walking, breaking soil, building fence, breathing. One day followed another. Mary Ellen looked at the open field, wind stirring powder over drift. She pictured him there, alone, haunted, boots dragging, but never stopping. She felt her throat tighten. "You built more than fences," she murmured. "You built a life strong enough for someone else to step into." Jesse turned, surprise flickering across his face. The moonlight etched his jaw, his scar, his weariness, and something else, hope so fragile she feared the cold might shatter it. He drew a breath. "When Harold laughed at you, I saw the same breaking I carried years ago. Couldn't watch it happen again." Tears blurred her vision, freezing at the corners of her lashes. "And I thought no one saw me." "I saw you," Jesse said simply. The words fell heavy, final, more binding than vows. They stood in silence until the cold drove them back to the cabin. Jesse laid more logs on the fire, and Mary Ellen spread blankets across her bunk in the corner. Neither spoke further, yet the air was charged, thick with the confession laid bare. At dawn, the storm broke. Sunlight flared sharp against snow, throwing long blue shadows across the yard. Jesse was already outside, splitting wood with measured force, muscles taut beneath wool. Mary Ellen watched from the doorway, breath clouding in morning air. Each swing of the axe was steady, purposeful, as though he split not just wood but memories, carving order from chaos. The sight steadied her in turn. She stepped out, boots sinking in snow, scarf pulled close. "Let me help," she said. He paused, considered, then handed her an armful of split logs. "Stack there." She obeyed, the work grounding her. Together they built neat rows of fuel against the wall, their breaths puffing white in rhythm. When the pile was finished, Jesse leaned on his axe, eyes softening. "You're stronger than you think, Mary Ellen." "So are you," she answered. The words hung between them, plain yet profound. Later, as the sun climbed higher, she ventured into the field alone. The snow sparkled under her boots, untouched and vast. She thought of Jesse carrying his friend, of the ridge soaked in blood, of all the graves dug into southern earth. She bent, scooped a handful of snow, pressed it to her lips. Cold, pure, a baptism of sorts. When she returned, Jesse was waiting by the porch, scarf wound against his throat. He studied her face and seemed to understand. No more words passed. None were needed. By late afternoon, clouds rolled heavy from the north, dragging gray bellies across the sky. Chickens huddled in their coop, restless. The dog, Bristle, growled low, ears twitching. Jesse Boone checked the sky once, then the horses, tightening ropes on the corral gate. Mary Ellen watched from the porch, shawl drawn close. The west did not wait. By sundown, wind struck like a whip. Snow hurled sideways, clinging to lashes, biting through cloth. Boards of the cabin moaned as gusts rattled their seams. Jesse hauled a shutter closed, hammering it tight. "First storm of the season," he shouted above the roar. "She'll test every nail." Mary Ellen fed logs into the stove, heat pressing against her cheeks while drafts nipped her ankles. The lamp swung from its hook, shadows lurching across rough-hewn walls. Each creak felt like warning. Night deepened. The storm thickened, hammering roof and shutter until the cabin itself seemed to sway. Mary Ellen's hands would not still. She set bread to rise, though she knew dough would not proof in such cold. She wiped the same tin plate thrice, polished spoons until her knuckles cracked. The air smelled of smoke, iron, her own fear. Jesse entered, snow clinging to his beard, eyes narrowed. "Roof's holding. Barn too. But if wind shifts, we'll see trouble." She swallowed. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that rides with hooves." His voice cut short, as if naming it might summon it. They sat near the fire. Silence pressed heavier than storm. Then faint but certain hoofbeats, distant, measured, carried by wind yet sharp enough to chill bone. Mary Ellen's chest tightened. The memory of Harold's jeering face rose unbidden, louder than storm. Jesse reached above the hearth, took down the shotgun. Its barrel was old, steel dulled but serviceable. He laid it across his knees. "Stay behind me," he said. But she did not. Her eyes fixed on the weapon, then on Jesse's scarred hands. She thought of Missouri nights, when her father taught her to shoulder a rifle in the cornfield, whispering, "Never let another decide your fate." She stood, her hands closed over the gun. Jesse blinked at her, surprise breaking his mask. "I'll take watch," she said. "You don't have to." "I do." He studied her face in the wavering lamplight. Whatever he saw resolve, maybe rage made him nod once. He gave the gun over, slow, careful. The cabin shook with another blast of wind. Snow hissed against shutter. The hoofbeats grew clearer. Mary Ellen moved to the door, every step heavy with defiance. She planted herself by the frame, barrel tilted toward black glass of night. Her breath came fast, but her grip held steady. Minutes stretched, only storm and hoofbeats. Then a shadow loomed rider on horseback, form blurred by whirling snow. The horse's breath steamed. A figure leaned in saddle, cloak whipping, face hidden. Mary Ellen's finger brushed the trigger. "Easy," Jesse murmured from behind. The rider slowed, stopped short of the fence. For a long beat, neither moved. Then, with a yank of reins, the figure wheeled and vanished into the storm, swallowed whole. Mary Ellen exhaled, knees threatening collapse. Jesse eased the shotgun from her hands, set it aside, then guided her to the bench. His touch was firm but not commanding. "You held," he said quietly. She nodded, throat too tight for words. The storm raged until dawn. Every gust seemed a test. The cabin held barely. The barn stood, roof heavy with snow but unbroken. Inside they endured with little sleep, fire crackling, hearts wound tight as the storm outside. When light finally bled through gaps in shutter, silence felt unreal. The world beyond was buried in drifts, fences bowed under weight, trees brittle with ice. Jesse opened the door. Cold knifed in, air sharp as glass. Together they stepped onto the porch. Their breath fogged white. The yard stretched pale and endless, broken only by hoofprints carved deep, proof the rider had been real. Mary Ellen knelt, fingers brushing the tracks. "He stopped here," she whispered. "Scouting," Jesse said. "Testing how close he can ride." His jaw tightened. "Harold?" She rose slowly, hair whipping in morning wind. For the first time, she did not shrink beneath the name. She squared her shoulders, voice steady. "If he comes again, he won't find me hiding." Jesse looked at her, long and deep, as if weighing truth in her words. Then he touched the brim of his hat, solemn. So be it. The storm had passed, but its mark remained not just in snowdrifts, but in the woman who had stood with a gun at the door. All that day, Mary Ellen carried the weight of it. While Jessie Boone mended a fence buckled by ice, she swept snow from the porch, stacked kindling, patched a tear in her skirt. Yet her thoughts circled back to that moment by the door, her finger on the trigger, breath tight, heart wild, yet steady. She had not faltered. By dusk, the air stilled, brittle and sharp. A single lamp burned on the cabin table, flame wavering against glass. Jessie sat sharpening a knife, the rasp steady. Mary Ellen kneaded bread, her hands firm, flour dusting her sleeves. For a time, it almost felt like peace. Then the dog bristled, hackles high. Bristle's growl turned low, guttural. Jessie set down the knife. Boots struck frozen earth outside, many boots. Voices rose, slurred, mocking, circling the cabin. "Come out, Boone," one called. "We brought a gift for your lady." Laughter followed, cruel, jagged as broken glass. Mary Ellen's spine stiffened. She knew that voice, Harold, thick with whiskey, dragging words like chains. The lamp flame wavered. Jessie moved to the door, rifle in hand. But Mary Ellen's feet carried her first. She gripped the shotgun propped near the wall, the wood cold under her palms. "You'll stay back," Jessie said, low. She shook her head. "Not tonight." Outside, boots scraped porch boards. Fists pounded the wall. Another voice jeered. "Spinster thought she'd find love. Found a monster instead." Mary Ellen's chest burned. Her father's words echoed. "Never let another decide your fate." She unlatched the door. Jessie hissed her name, but it was too late. The door swung wide. Cold slammed in, carrying stink of whiskey and sweat. 5 men stood in the yard, shadows thrown long by their own torches. Snow crunched under boots. Faces red with drink, eyes mean. Harold stood at the center, hat tipped low, smirk twisting his lips. "Well," he drawled, "the bride herself." "Come to greet us?" Mary Ellen raised the shotgun. The barrel gleamed dull in torchlight. Her voice cracked, then hardened. "This is my ground. You don't cross it." The men chuckled, shifting. One spat into snow. Another fingered his belt knife. "Easy, sweetheart," Harold mocked. "That gun's too heavy for your soft hands." Her finger tightened. She fired into the night sky. The blast ripped the silence. Snow burst from a fence post, smoke curling sharp. Horses reared, men cursed, torches shook. For a heartbeat, the yard froze. Mary Ellen's voice cut through, raw and loud. "I am not your joke. Not your wager. Not your shame. You'll turn back, or you'll bleed here." The men shuffled, unsettled. Harold sneered, but his laughter wavered. "Look at her," he spat. "Hiding behind Boone's gun, thinking she's something more than a—" "Enough!" Jessie thundered, stepping into the doorway, rifle steady in his hands. His shadow loomed beside hers, not overtaking, but standing equal. "You heard her. Leave." For a moment, no one moved. Snow drifted, lamp flame quivered, breath smoked white. Then Harold stepped forward, boots crunching slow, eyes locked on Mary Ellen. "Pull that trigger on me," he taunted. "Prove you've got more than fear in you." Her heart slammed. The weight of the shotgun dug into her shoulder. She thought of Missouri nights, of her father's lessons, of the train platform where laughter had cut her soul open. Her finger steadied. Jessie shifted, ready. The men behind Harold muttered, uneasy. One tugged his arm. "She'll do it, Harold." "She ain't blinking," but Harold shook him off, grinning wide, hungry for power. "No, she won't. She's nothing but blubber and tears." The words struck deep, but not as before. This time the hurt turned to fire. Mary Ellen's voice rose, strong as the storm's own wind. "I am not yours to name. I am not yours at all." Her finger pressed the trigger. The shotgun roared, thunder cracking across the yard. Flames spat from the barrel, smoke billowed sharp. Snow erupted at Harold's boots, showering him with ice and dirt. He stumbled back, arms flailing, hat tumbling into the drift. For a breath, silence. Then chaos. Torches wavered. Horses reared, hooves striking sparks on frozen ground. The men who had come laughing now shouted curses, stumbling from her line of fire. Harold scrambled upright, face twisted. "She fired!" he screamed. "The cow fired!" Mary Ellen's shoulders trembled, but her grip held. The shotgun smoked in her hands. Her chest rose and fell in ragged heaves, yet her eyes did not drop. Jesse Boone stepped beside her, rifle lifted, voice a low growl. "Any man step closer, he falls." The torchlight caught his face, scarred, shadowed, steady. Not bluster, not drunken rage, a soldier's promise. The men faltered. Some cursed Harold under their breath. Others glanced at this dark tree line, as though escape waited there. Then from behind came another sound, hoofbeats pounding, not furtive this time, but fierce, growing louder by the second. A lantern swung high, casting gold across the snow. "Sheriff's here!" someone cried. Indeed, Sheriff Alden rode into the yard, coat flapping, badge glinting. Beside him came Martha from the Red Hollow store, skirts hitched, a rolling pin gripped like a war club. Behind them, townsfolk followed, lanterns bobbing, pitchforks raised, a dozen strong. The drunk men froze, their courage leaking into the snow. Mary Ellen lowered the gun a fraction, breath shuddering. The lamp flame from the cabin flickered against her cheek, sweat shining despite the cold. She realized she had not only defended herself, she had changed the ground beneath all of them. Martha's voice rang sharp. "Shame on you lot! 5 against 1 woman, and her with courage enough to stand taller than the lot of you." Sheriff Alden dismounted, hand on revolver. His voice cut cold. "Drop your weapons!" Now knives clattered. A torch hissed into snow. But Harold held his ground, face red, hair plastered damp. "You fools," he spat. "She's ruined. She belongs to no one. What's she worth but laughter?" The townsfolk stirred, murmurs hard and disapproving. For the first time, Harold's sneer found no echo. Mary Ellen raised her chin, voice clear. "I belong to myself." "That is worth more than your $20 bet," the words struck like steel. Even the wind hushed. Sheriff Alden seized Harold's arm. "You'll spend a night in the cell, sober up, and maybe remember you're not the law here." Harold jerked free, eyes darting wild. "This ain't over." But it was for now. His men melted into the crowd, muttering apologies. The sheriff led Harold toward the road, lanterns bobbing after them, until the yard was left in near silence. Dawn crept pale across the horizon, painting the snow pink, then red as sun climbed. The storm's wreckage shone sharp. Fences bowed, drifts piled high. Yet in the yard, something heavier had shifted. Mary Ellen's arms dropped, the shotgun sagging. Jesse caught it before it fell. He looked at her long, voice hushed. "You stood taller than all of us." She shook her head, tears spilling hot against frozen air. "I only stood because I had to. That's the only way that matters." From the porch, Martha stepped close, laying her broad hand on Mary Ellen's shoulder. "You've done what few dared, child. The town won't whisper about shame anymore. They'll whisper about courage." Mary Ellen met her gaze, uncertain. But when she glanced at the gathered faces, she saw nods, heard murmurs not of pity but of respect. For the first time since the train platform, she was not merely endured, she was seen. Jesse holstered his rifle, jaw easing. "Go inside," he said gently. "Rest. The day's only begun, and you've already faced more than most men." She obeyed, but not from weakness. Her steps were steady, shoulders lifted, as if each stride carried her further from the shadow Harold had cast. Inside, she set the shotgun back on its pegs. The lamp burned low, oil nearly gone. She touched the glass. watching the flame sway, thinking how close it had come to being snuffed and how it still burned. Outside, voices faded as the crowd dispersed. Hooves clopped, boots crunched, until only Jesse's tread remained. He entered, brushing snow from his coat, eyes soft when they found hers. "You changed the story tonight," he said. She sank into the chair, exhaustion rolling through her bones. "Did I?" "Yes." He poured her water, slid the cup across. "You're no one's victim. Not anymore." She sipped, throat raw, heart still racing. The words settled over her like a quilt ruff, heavy but warming. Sunlight reached through the frosted window, touching her face. She closed her eyes, let it sink in. For a moment, peace. Then Jesse's voice, low, cautious. "But Harold won't forget. He'll come back, not with drunks this time, but with something worse. And when he does, it won't just be your fight. It'll be ours." Mary Ellen opened her eyes, steady. "Then let him." I've already stopped hiding. Outside, the red sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Valley Creek. Snow sparkled, deceptively beautiful, as though the land itself held its breath for what would follow. By late morning, word of the night's standoff had flown faster than prairie wind. In Red Hollow, whispers curled through the mercantile, over whiskey at the dust lantern, past the clapboard steps of the boarding house. Every tongue weighed Mary Ellen anew, not as fool or joke, but as woman who had stood in the open, gun-braced, while Harold shrank before her. Still, not all eyes softened. Some narrowed. In a frontier town, respect and suspicion often came bound together. When Martha arrived with her wagon, skirts bundled against cold, she carried a firm voice. "You'll come with me today," she told Mary Ellen. "Sunday service. Time folks saw you walk in with your head high." Mary Ellen hesitated, hands dusted with flour from the morning bread. "After last night, they'll stare." "They stared before," Martha said briskly. "Difference is now they'll have to decide whether to sneer or to nod. Best give them the chance." Jesse Boone, leaning on the doorframe, arms crossed, gave a slow nod. "She's right." His tone held no command, only quiet certainty. And so, come midday, Mary Ellen climbed into Martha's wagon, shawl pulled tight, cheeks pale against the crisp wind. Jesse rode alongside on his roan, rifle sheathed but visible. Together they crested the ridge into Canyon Bluff, where the wooden church stood stark against the sky, bell tower sharp as a sentinel. The town gathered in clusters outside, boots stamping, breath steaming. Children tugged at mittens, men adjusted coats, women whispered behind gloved hands. As Mary Ellen stepped down, a hush rippled, subtle but sure. She walked forward, each step crunching snow. No veil, no satin, only her patched wool dress and worn boots. Yet her chin lifted, eyes fixed on the church door. She carried no apology. Inside, pine pews creaked as townsfolk settled. The preacher's voice rose, steady, but Mary Ellen heard only the rasp of her own breath. She sat beside Martha, Jesse close behind. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows, catching dust motes that danced like unseen spirits. During the hymn, her voice trembled, but she sang. Low at first, then stronger, until she felt Jesse's gaze on her, a weight and a balm. After service, the preacher gave his benediction. Folks rose, shuffling, murmuring. Then it came, a moment she had not expected. Jesse Boone stepped forward, hat in hand, shoulders square before the whole congregation. His voice carried plain. "I've no words pretty enough for the moment," he said, "but I've got steadiness, and I've got truth. I aim to make Mary Ellen my wife, if she'll have me." Gasps rustled the pews, some faces lit with surprise, others pinched with judgment, but none spoke louder than Mary Ellen's own silence as every gaze turned to her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Heat climbed her cheeks. For an instant, the old shame threatened to drown her, the train platform, the laughter, Harold's smirk. Then she remembered the porch, the storm, the shotgun's thunder, the way Jessie had stood not in front of her, but beside her. She rose. "I came here thinking myself foolish," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "But I found no fool's refuge. I found a man who speaks little, but means much, who holds not with pretty lies, but with steady truths. Yes, Jessie Boone, I'll have you." The church erupted not in scorn, but in applause. Even those who frowned could not hush the swell of approval. Martha clapped loudest, tears wetting her broad cheeks. The preacher raised his hands, smiling. "Then let the bell ring. This house of God will stand witness outside," the bell tolled, bronze voice rolling across the snowbound valley. Townsfolk spilled into the yard, laughter and chatter rising like smoke. Mary Ellen stood on the steps, the sound washing over her, not as mockery, but as chorus. She felt Jessie's hand slip into hers, large and rough, yet gentle as spring thaw. Snow glittered on the church roof, sunlight blazing. For once, her dress, her size, her past, mattered less than the vow unspoken, but alive between them. She glanced at Jessie. His dark eyes met hers, steady, certain. In them she read not possession, not pity, but promise. And as the bell's echo faded, she knew Canyon Bluff itself had shifted. She was no longer merely the woman who arrived by train to cruel laughter. She was Mary Ellen Boone, to be standing tall in a town that had once broken her. Yet even in that triumph a shadow lingered. Somewhere, Harold nursed his bruised pride and plotted. Somewhere beyond the ridge, snowmelt rivers swelled with the promise of spring and with the threat of flood. But in Valley Creek, morning brought thaw. Snow shrank from fence posts, mud streaked wagon ruts, geese traced arrows through pale skies. Mary Ellen rose early, shawl over shoulders, and stepped into the yard. In her hand she carried a pouch of seeds beans, squash, corn, the same her mother had once saved in glass jars back in Missouri. The ground was cold, not ready, but she knelt anyway, fingers digging past frost into soil dark and waiting. Each seed she pressed down was more than food. Each was vow, to endure, to grow, to believe. Behind her, Jessie Boone appeared from the barn, arms strong under a swaddled bundle. The infant stirred, soft cries muffled in wool. Their child, their proof. He lowered himself beside her, boots sinking in damp earth. "So soon?" he asked, nodding at the garden. "So soon," she answered, pushing dirt over a seed. "Life doesn't wait for us to be ready." He smiled, slow, weary from nights broken by cries but bright with something new. "Then let her see it," he said, tilting the bundle so their daughter's dark eyes caught the light. Mary Ellen brushed a fingertip over tiny knuckles. The child gripped instinctively, fierce despite her size. They worked together, he rocking the infant. She sewing rows, both quiet but bound by the rhythm of renewal. Above, clouds thinned, sunlight spilled across melted furrows. When the last seed was covered, Mary Ellen sat back, skirts damp, breath steaming. She reached into her pocket, drew a folded scrap. A letter, Harold's letter, once treasured, later despised. She had kept one, not to ache, but to remind. She read it once more, eyes tracing the false poetry. "My dearest, I dreamt of fields and laughter." Lies every word, but lies that had carried her west. She looked to Jessie, steady as the earth beneath, and whispered, "If not for his cruelty, I'd never have found my way here." Jessie did not flinch at the name, only adjusted the child in his arms. "Then let that be the last power he holds, a shadow that pointed you toward light." Mary Ellen tore the page, strips fluttering on spring wind, scattering like ash. "No more." From the porch, Martha's voice called, carrying warmth and command. "Soup's ready, and you'll both eat before working yourselves thin." Laughter drifted up from the yard. Even Bristle the dog barked approval. They rose together, Jessie cradling child, Mary Ellen brushing soil from her hands. She paused, gazing at the neat rows stretching behind them. "They'll grow," she said. "They will," Jessie replied. "Like us." Like her, they walked to the porch, steps steady, not hurried. Behind them, the garden waited, seeds hidden, roots beginning their silent labor. Inside, the cabin smelled of broth and fresh bread. Firelight glowed, babies' cries softened. Martha bustled with bowls. Life, plain and hard and good, filled the room. As dusk came, Mary Ellen stepped outside once more. Stars pricked the dark, coyotes yipped far off. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, listening. The valley was quiet now, but she knew storms and dangers would come again, floods, drought, men like Harold. Yet she also knew she would not face them alone. Jessie joined her, daughter asleep against his chest. He tilted his head, eyes following hers to the sky. "Think she'll remember this night?" he asked softly. "She doesn't need to," Mary Ellen said. "It will live in us and in what we give her." They stood until the chill deepened, until the baby stirred. Then they turned back inside, closing the door on the dark. On the table lay a pouch, seeds yet unsown. Tomorrow she would plant more. Tomorrow she would water what they had begun. Tomorrow life would push upward through broken ground. For the first time since that dusty platform at Canyon Bluff, Mary Ellen felt not mocked, not weighed, not waiting. She felt rooted. And in the fragile hush of spring, Valley Creek whispered its own vow. What begins in ruin may yet rise in bloom. Mary Ellen's journey had carried her from humiliation at the train platform to the steady shelter of Jessie Boone's cabin. From nights of storm and fear to the red dawn when she stood unbroken before a jeering crowd. And finally to the wooden church where vows were spoken with quiet conviction. She learned that strength was not found in denial of pain, but in planting seeds despite it. That dignity comes not from the world's approval, but from standing firm in one's own ground. And that sometimes the cruelest betrayal can become the very road that leads to home. I recall one small moment that told the whole story. After the first thaw, Jessie carried their newborn to the garden's edge, and Mary Ellen pressed a single seed into soil with trembling fingers. When the baby's tiny hand closed around her mother's thumb, hope itself seemed to root beneath the earth. And now the question remains for us, when mocked, when wronged, when left to face storms alone, do we choose to collapse under shame? Or do we stand and plant something new? If this story touched you, leave a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe to hear the next tale rising from the western dust, and share this with someone who needs the reminder that even broken ground can yield a harvest. The message is simple. No cruelty can define us if we dare to live gently, stand bravely, and plant again.